Hello, everyone. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, let's give this a go. So, my name is Karima Noren, and with Veronica Gonzalez, we have the pleasure of spending the next 30 minutes talking to you about the GDPR. So, the challenge we had with this GDPR is that with only 8 days to go before this legislation comes into force, we're kind of well aware that some of you will have walked 1,000 miles on your privacy compliance journey, or at least I hope some of you will have done that. Some of you will have made a few tentative steps, and some of you will think this doesn't apply to me at all, I don't need to do the GDPR. In addition to that, I'm well aware that some of you are in the finance team, the legal team, the marketing team. You're all in different roles. So even if you have tackled the GDPR, you're probably approaching it all in a slightly different way, okay? So what we are trying to do is we're going to try and make this session relevant to all of you. And you can tell us how we do or how we did at the end. Okay, so let me just get used to this clicking, because I need to click this way and look this way. So let's give this a go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend some time telling you why you need to care. And although this may sound a bit trite, the point is that at the moment, no one cares. And if we don't care, we cannot get this right. And Veronica is going to spend some time doing the practical side of things, of how to actually achieve that everybody in your organization cares. Okay. So I was in France a couple of weeks ago, and I was by an antique shop, and there was a grenade, like a real grenade. And I needed this grenade for this talk. So I said to my husband, oh, look at this grenade, should I bring it? And he said, do you want to stand in New York in front of people with a real grenade? And he said, probably not. So I don't have a real grenade, but I'm going to assume you all know what a grenade is, okay? And so for the next 30 minutes, but especially beyond, try and visualize that you're holding this grenade. Take the pin out, what you have is an active grenade, and this grenade is your personal information, okay, and the personal information of all the people connected to you through LinkedIn and Facebook and any other social media platform that you use. Okay, fact number one, information is power. We all know this, okay? We all know this because in times of conflict, wars, if we know something about our enemy, we will defeat them. We know that if we know what causes an illness, we can find a cure. And in love, if we know the language of love of our partner, then we will have a successful relationship. So, quite basic fact. Fact number two, power can be dangerous. And this is really important. We know that, but power can be dangerous if it's in the wrong hands, if it's misused, if it's used by ignorant people, stupid people, or people with unethical or immoral objectives. Okay. Personal information is extremely powerful, all right? And at the moment, we're all taking it for granted. It's extremely powerful, and I can give you some very basic examples, but if somebody knows the password of your account, they can take your money. If somebody knows that you're having an affair, they can blackmail you. If somebody knows you're suffering from depression, they might not give you a job. Okay, so there's an awful lot of power behind your personal information. And of course, we all have this personal information, okay, quite a lot of it. Then we give it away. I'm going to power through this quite quickly. And what we do is we leave a data trail. Now, here's the thing that most organizations are failing to do today, is they tackle data protection from a legal perspective, looking at it without trying to change the mindset of their organization. So what I'm trying to do is make you appreciate that it should matter to you. And so what happens is when we go about consuming in our industry, from the moment we wake up as individuals, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we hand over our personal information to multiple people, multiple organizations, multiple times a day, and we do this without thinking about it. And the important thing here is that we, as individuals, have personal information, right? Because we're all holding the grenade. And we hand that personal information to other people, and we are these other people, because we are the employees in our organizations receiving the personal information of others all day long. So a couple of weeks ago in London, there was the big IAPP conference, and there was a data protection officer for a very large German company handling a lot of medical data of thousands of people across the world. And the CEO said to this data protection officer, how do I bring down the risk of data protection to zero? And she said, you fire everyone, because the risk is in your people. So you need to change the mindset of your people, okay? So just remember that you're holding the personal information. You hand it over to somebody else that is the same people here because you're in that room. And actually, it's very possible that you know information about the person next to you and he knows information about you. So we all need to care. Oh, this is quite tricky. Okay, so in practice, the GDPR is all about you in your capacity as a human being in society. You are the data subject. And what you do is you hand over personal information to the people you are buying stuff from, which are, I just named some very obvious ones, but you know, Facebook, Instagram, Grindr, Tinder, Netflix, whatever we use every day. These people are your controllers. It's as if you're handing the grenade to the person behind you, next to you, on your left, on your right, because you feel like you know these organizations. You know their CEO, you know where they're established, you know where their headquarters are, so you think, I know this guy. They are your data controllers. These data controllers, when they deliver the service you want from them to you, they will have to hand over your personal information to someone else, because they just do. So they hand over your personal information to processors like AWS and Salesforce and SagePay and any HR tool. And that's when your personal information, instead of going to the person in front of you, goes at the back of this room somewhere. And then eventually that processor will take your information and hand it over to a sub-processor. And that's when your data leaves this building, leaves New York, leaves the United States, and ends up in another jurisdiction. And this happens multiple times a day, really, 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 really fast, okay? And so at the moment, because none of us care, okay, and you know, when I was doing this talk, Veronica kept saying to me, but you don't understand, Europeans care about data, Americans don't care about their personal information. So, okay, well, let's try, okay? But what's happening is that at the moment, because the dangers associated with this proliferation of information really fast is just a whisper, and it is a European whisper, the equivalent of what we're doing today is if all of us took this grenade that you're holding it, and on the count of 3, I would say to you, chuck it, you would throw it, and it would go in different directions at different speed, it would be caught by different people, and actually most of them would go boom and collapse on the floor. And so although at this stage you're still thinking, I don't get this lady, what is she talking to me about? Is if you are in charge of doing GDPR within your organization, it doesn't matter at what stage you're at, you need to start with changing the mindset of your people to create a mindset and a cultural shift where the individual receiving the personal information actually cares about it and starts applying the rules. So the real question is whether you care and whether you feel safe. You might do. So the GDPR, instead of looking at the GDPR as something really annoying coming out of Europe where you're thinking, ugh, I'm getting all these marketing emails telling me I can't market you because of the GDPR, and what is this, yeah? The GDPR is simply there to stop the grenades going off, all right? It's only there to protect our personal information. And it's not there to stop innovation. It's not there to prevent us handling our personal information. It's not there to prevent organization processing the personal information. It's there to do one simple thing, to let us as individuals understand what is happening to our personal information so that we can exercise rights in relation to it. And this is very important because as you're going to go about implementing the GDPR, you're going to find it difficult because we all find it difficult. But if we remember the objective, we eventually find it easy to do. So the objective is, in that maze that I showed you, where you start as the data subject, passing the information to Facebook, and then it goes to the processor, to the sub-processor, the only thing the GDPR is asking us to do is understand where that data is traveling, so that us as individuals can go, hey, hang on a second, I'm not okay with this. I am not okay with where my data is going or what you're using it for. And the way that the GDPR does this, it does this through a set of principles, okay? So it's principle-based, which means that it's very hard to get the right answer. But, and Veronica is going to talk about this a little bit more. So the point is that the way that it does this, and I'm not going to go through this because we only have 30 minutes, so I can't go in depth into the GDPR. Call me, because I love the topic. We can talk about it for a long, a long time if you want to. The principles are very sensible principles. They say the following. I'm going to summarize them in less than a minute. If you're in an organization and you need to comply with the GDPR, and you receive personal information, what you need to do with this information is the following. And when I mean what you need to do, you is you. You as each individual person working in that organization. You need to ask yourself whether you have a right to that information in the first place. And that's when people are talking about things like legitimate interests and consent and performance of a contract. The point is you have no right to personal information unless you can establish it and prove that you have that right. Then you have to say, what is the purpose? I need this information for this reason. Then you have to only use that information for that purpose, so you can't use it for a different purpose. Eventually, you're going to have to ensure that throughout the course of the time you're holding this data, you're keeping it accurate. And then you're going to have to eventually delete it. You have to put a layer of security around it, and then you have to be accountable for it. And accountable means having a team of people doing it, and Veronica will talk about that. And you have to document what you're doing with this information, okay, constantly. See? Sorry. It's not working. It worked? Okay, so. Yeah, next one. So if at this stage you're still thinking, oh man, I went to the wrong session, I should have gone in the other room, and you're thinking, how does this apply to me? I don't get it. What are we talking about? Just do a little recap about why this applies to you legally in the United States, even though it is a European legislation. Because, so first of all, it stands for General Data Protection Regulation, we know that. It becomes the law in all European countries in 8 days on the 25th of May. There's nothing else for these European countries to do. On the 25th of May, it is the law in those countries. It's not like Y2K, and this is the point that's really important. On the 25th of May, it starts. It doesn't end there. The journey begins on the 25th of May and will continue for a very long time. And it applies to you and anyone in the world if you are selling products or services to EU residents, or if you are monitoring the behavior of EU residents, okay, will apply to your organization. It's the strictest regime, so if you have a global organization, if you comply with the GDPR, you're likely to comply all over the world, and that's a benefit, I think. It's a benefit. You might as well do it this way. To be fair, not all organizations are going to go down that route. Some will choose a different route. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't really matter whether it applies to you legally. You should just apply it. Apply it today, because the journey has begun, and it may be the law only in Europe today, but it's going to be the law in all other countries in the world by tomorrow. So if you start complying with it today, you're going to be doing much better in the future. So you need to care. And you need to care not because of the fines, not because you might be on the first page of the New York Times because of a breach. You need to care because it makes our society better. So that's why you need to care. So if I haven't managed to convince you now, and of course I've only got 34 seconds to do this before I have to hand over to Veronica, so I have a bit of a challenge. I just want to walk you through a little story. Okay, so it's Monday morning, my alarm doesn't go off, I'm in a really bad mood. I collect my kids, I shuffle them in the car. In the car I have a little telematic device that's recording my driving. It's there to reduce my insurance premium, but I don't know what it is recording. I sort of shout at my kids, I drop them off at school, they arrive at school, there's an iPad where they have to record how happy they are today, you know? So 1 is I'm not happy at all, and 10 is I'm really happy. All my 3 kids type in 1 because they're just not happy. Obviously, I was shouting at them. I arrive at work, load my computer on. It's my game of online poker that I didn't finish the night before, so I just decide to quickly finish it, you know, before I dive into my work. I also email my friends using WhatsApp and whatever, and I tell them I'm feeling a bit low today, just feeling a bit down. Then about noon, Amazon sends me an email and tells me that my smart fridge has reordered this 36 bottles of beer, which I had ordered the week before. So it just repeated the order. That's great. Day doesn't improve. I get home, continue shouting at my kids. Siri, Cortana, Alexa are all in the vicinity recording I don't know what. Eventually, I read an article before going to bed on some online publisher. I choose low mood, depression, menopause, whatever you want. And then I eventually flick on Netflix, and I randomly pick a movie about a mother that abuses her children. Tuesday comes. It's actually doing pretty well. I'm having a better day on Tuesday. But my kid falls down the stairs, cracks his head open. I have to go to A&E. I arrive at A&E. The nurse takes her iPad, looks at the profile, types in my name. Up comes an alarm. Social services are called in. And that's because somebody has done a profile on me. And the profile is obviously relatively negative. I mean, this came out as unfit mother. Now, you might think that this is completely crazy and this woman with the lady and the yellow trousers is crazy. This is happening today. The profiling of us as individuals is happening today. And the point is we don't understand who's doing it and how it's being done. Therefore, we can't put a stop to it. So the GDPR is only about creating the transparency that you need. So, very quickly to summarize. I started this session by saying that information is power. Knowledge is always our best weapon. We know today that personal information can be dangerous. We know it from the Mark Schrems and the Snowden and the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, and all of these stories are telling us it is pretty dangerous unless we put a brake on it. So, adopt the GDPR. Veronica is going to tell you how she does it at Outbrains. We've actually been working on this together for some time. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth doing.
May I have to stand over here? Sorry. Like worse than my cable box. Okay, so I'm going to talk through now that Karima has kind of pushed us in the direction of you should really care about this, even though it's largely a European law and may not actually be necessary for all your companies to implement. I'm going to talk you through how we've built our privacy program at Outbrains. So first and foremost is the team. This is the most important aspect. This is ridiculous. I'm going to stand over here. Yeah, sure. So this is the most important aspect, and I think it's one of the things that I messed up when we started, in that I'm on the legal team, and we were doing our privacy program together with the security team, and we didn't want to bother people. We didn't feel like we could go to the marketing department and the engineers and the product team and say, give us all your time and be distracted from the work you're supposed to be doing to help with the privacy program. But we very quickly learned that there's no way we can learn what all of these people are doing, and we need to get them on board. So the first piece of advice I would give you is to spend a lot of time cultivating a team of individuals that you give them a version of Karima's spiel and telling them, I need you to care about this. This is important to the organization, and you should be focusing on this, and we're gonna help you along, but you're the subject matter expert, and we really need you to help. The quality of the team is really going to be the quality of the output. And what you want to be doing is empowering these individuals to be like ambassadors and, dare I say, little spies across the whole organization that can tell you, hey, this is what the marketing department is thinking of doing. The engineers are thinking of building this new feature. So you want to get this team together and get it going. The next one, soon, is the promises. So together with Karima, what we came up with was taking the 88 pages of the GDPR, which is principle-based. It's not prescriptive. My company is an online advertising company. The GDPR says the word advertising once in the recitals. It's not overly helpful to figure out what we should actually be doing. So what we did is we took the 88 pages of GDPR and consolidated it into 8 promises that we felt were really easy to understand. If you read them through, the first one, I'm not going to go through them all, is awareness. We know our privacy obligations. That's easy enough for the most junior person at the organization to understand. So we came up with these promises, and then we said, okay, we need to make this an actionable plan. So from an awareness perspective, I'll just tell you how we did it. So we said, okay, we know we want everyone to understand their privacy obligations. How do we do this? We have security and legal leading the privacy program. Then we came up with this group of privacy champions, which is a cross-functional group of people that are leading various departments. And then we had all staff. And we came up for training levels for each of these 3 groups. But in our organization, we very quickly realized that it would be impossible to train all staff in a way that we could really be breaking privacy into our organization. So we came up with this middle layer of people, of about 60 people that we call privacy gatekeepers. And what I tell them is, your job is to raise your hand, to just come see us. So we gave them a little bit more training than all staff and less than our privacy champions, but just enough so they could say, hey, I need to raise something. We're thinking of launching this new product. We're thinking of launching these new features. And came up with a critical group of people across the organization that I'm not asking that much of them, but they're going to be critical to baking privacy into the organization. Now, you want to keep iterating on this plan. When we first started, we thought, okay, we have 50 tasks to complete. And as we went through, I was like, this is an enormous onion. You peel back one layer, and you're like, oh boy, there's a lot more in here. There's a lot more to do. And the important part is that you just run with it, you go with it, you realize there's always going to be more work to do, but you document it, given that a huge part of GDPR is being able to actually demonstrate compliance. So you want to write it all down, and you want to get credit for the math problem, even if you get the answer wrong at the end. So just put it all in writing and kind of walk through what your company has done. The next thing is to keep focus. What I've seen a lot, and with other colleagues that are working on implementing GDPR, is there's scope creep, right? GDPR is about the personal data of European citizens. Arguably, and as Karima said, you should be implementing your privacy program globally, but it's about personal data. There's been many instances where we've said to the company, okay, we're gonna make this change, or we're going to do something different, like a clean desk policy. Get those resumes out of your drawer, let's make sure we have like a day where you spend an hour, we give you some snacks, and everyone cleans up and gets ready. And people call you and are like, well, what do I do about invoices? And what do I do about this? And everyone's panicking, and it's like, okay, go back to what we're actually trying to achieve. The passing of that grenade and the personal data. Don't let the project roll into you somehow are working on the privacy program, and now you're responsible for data retention of business data across the whole company. Focus on what you're actually trying to achieve. So next, I would point out that it's a journey. So there's a lot of focus on May 25th. My email is blowing up right now with everyone trying to get as much done as they can before next Friday. But this is really just the first step of the longer journey. If you're really adopting privacy in your organization, this is just when the regulators can start coming at you with enforcement actions, right? So the joke I make is it's kind of like a couple that's been living together for a long time. After they get married and they come back from their honeymoon and you say, how's it going? And they're like, just like before. So that's what I think May 26th is going to be like, except everyone has this fear of enforcement actions. But you just need to keep driving along on your privacy journey. Next, I would say, is privacy by design, not perfection. So there's going to be instances where you're not going to arrive at what might be seen as the right answer. Because the authorities have said that they are not choosing organizations to go after. Instead, they're being responsive to complaints and deciding what companies to pursue based on complaints. It's impossible to think that you could make every end user happy out there, right? Like, someone's gonna complain about a line in your privacy policy or something that you did. The point is to be thoughtful about how you baked privacy into your processes, right? Document it, think about, okay, well, we weighed this, we weighed that, we did a privacy impact assessment, we've stored it, and even if we didn't arrive at the perfect decision, the way another company would have done it, we were thoughtful and we were considering privacy every step of the way. So in terms of a methodology to action your plan, I would divide it into 3. One is the quick wins, and you need someone on the team, and maybe it's you, that can just crank out a bunch of successes. So if I'll go back to the example of the promise of awareness, one of the things we did was trainings. Another thing that we did was sent a privacy pledge to all of our employees, which summarized in 2 pages what our privacy program was, and asked them to sign it. Another thing we did was hung posters around the office, right, on the way to the bathroom, but in all of our global offices, so it's just top of mind to people. And then we also created some adorable stickers that we put on people's desks, and now all of a sudden they're thinking about GDPR a little bit more. Next are labor-intensive tasks. Karima referenced controllers and processors, so one of the requirements under GDPR is if you're a controller of personal data, you need to reach out to every processor you have, and you need to put a data processing agreement in place. This sounds pretty easy, but you know what I learned? It's very hard to figure out how many organizations you're working with, right? Like, you need to figure out every company you're working with, then you need to do an analysis of, okay, who's the business owner that owns this relationship? You need to reach out to them and say, tell me a little bit more about how we're working with this organization. Is their personal data being used? Rank them, which we did 1, 2, 3, and then you need to start reaching out to them. And in our case, we thought we were ahead and we started reaching out, but especially with American companies, their response was, what are you talking about? Why are you asking me this in 2017? Now, every single one is responding. They all want to sign up data processing agreements, but it's a labor-intensive task and you just need to be cranking against it. And then next are the hard decisions. Karima. And the thing with the hard decisions to remember is that what's hard for you in your specific organization, mine again is online advertising, is actually hard for everybody else as well. So an example I'll give you for Outbrain is that what we're doing is online behavioral advertising. So we're the ones following you with ads across the internet. And the GDPR has some limitations on how you can be doing that in terms of you need a lawful basis to be able to use personal data, and arguably you need to get consent for that. But now, am I really gonna go to CNN and say, oh, because I'm powering something on the back of your site, I'm just gonna put a pop-up on your site to everybody that lands there and get consent? CNN would be like, no, you will not do that on my site. Thank you so much, right? So all of ad tech was having these questions, and we all sat around and looked at each other for a while and realized, okay, it's not just us. We don't have a good way of implementing the GDPR. And ultimately, a membership body solved this for us, or is trying to solve it for us, and is creating some tech. So it's important that publishers can utilize to get consent on behalf of all of their vendors. So don't be afraid of the hard stuff, because it's hard for everyone else as well. It's principle-based, not prescriptive, and it's a brand new law, so everyone's just figuring it out. Fix the past, but focus on the future. I'll give you a practical example of this. So when you're hiring candidates, you get a lot of resumes. You shouldn't be leaving those around. You should have a data retention policy, their personal data in those resumes, and you should be cleaning it up. So we said, how are we gonna solve this for all of the resumes that have been passed around in the past? So we did the desk cleanup. If they had them in the drawer, they took notes, got back to their desk, and just threw them in the drawer. But were we really asking all of our employees to go back to any emails they've received in the last 2 years that potentially included someone's resume of a candidate they were considering? Okay, you can't do this. You gotta move on. We gotta think about what else to do. So we came up with a process for how we're gonna distribute resumes in the future. And we tried to do a little cleanup for the past, but we didn't dwell on it. The next important point is not to stall the program. I've seen a lot of companies go down rabbit holes, friends and colleagues that have said, oh, well, we've spent 6 months on this one aspect. You're never gonna get anywhere. May 25th is very soon, and it's an ongoing journey. Keep cranking against a bunch of the things that you have to do. And then much like attending this conference, you wanna collaborate with people in your industry, because it circles back to that hard point, that first point of what's hard for you is also hard for everybody else. I'll give you another example. Under the GDPR, I've yet to meet a company that fully understands how they're gonna do data portability, which is if a data subject asks for it, you have to give them their data in a way that they can actually port it and use it someplace else. That varies wildly based on what your business model is. And then this goes back really to the Karima point in terms of doing a cultural shift. The number one thing I would say is try and make it relevant. We had one privacy champion that was critical to our program, but he was not on board. He thought this was a socialist European law that was inhibiting innovation, and any meeting we brought him to, he just like crossed his arms and sat in the corner and huffed, but super smart guy. Then one day, our security team tried to roll out, or did roll out, a mobile device management program, right? Which many of you are probably familiar with. If you use your own phone, if you bring your own device to your workplace, your security team will probably try and implement one of these programs that you have to set a password and they can wipe your phone. And he was beside himself, could not believe this. And he wrote to the whole privacy champions group saying, this infringes my privacy and it's not okay. And we talked him through it, and it hadn't really gone through the full process. But it turned him around, right? Because if he finally reached his red line of when privacy mattered to him, when he thought that the company was going to be able to read his WhatsApp messages, right? That's what he was really concerned about. He could now have a lens with which to apply all the other things that we were doing and why privacy was so important. Next, I would make it accessible. One of the things we've done is to try and have more transparency with end users about what type of data we collect about them. We've built out some pretty cool features, and the sales team ended up loving these, right? And we did it purposely because now you have a huge part of the workforce that is actually on board with what you created because they think it helps them close deals by being able to showcase what our technology does. And then last but not least is not to just focus on compliance. It's a lot of money and it's a lot of time, a lot of resources to just do the bare minimum. I would argue that you have to push it a little bit further so that your company is actually deriving value from all of the time and money that you're spending on a program like this. So I'm out of time, but in the next 8 days, if you've done nothing or you've done a lot, these are the things that I would focus on. Visible compliance. Awareness may not seem like visible compliance, but if an EU citizen reaches out to support and support responds with some like really crappy answer that shows right away that they have no idea what GDPR is and how they might need to be responding to this type of request, not good. So get some sort of messaging out immediately, or at least before next Friday. Update your privacy policy. Truly updating a privacy policy takes a long, long time, but there's a few things that you can do to just say, okay, that's a system from 3 years ago. We're still referencing to contact us by fax. How has no one updated that? Do we have a fax machine, right? Little things like this to update your privacy policy. I challenge you guys. I read a lot of privacy policies, to look up any company by May 25th, and almost any global company is going to have a new policy that has been published in the last 90 days. And then be contactable, right? So remember what I said about authorities or the enforcement authorities not choosing companies to go after, but instead responding to complaints. So you want to be the type of company that makes it easy for a user to complain directly to you first, to have a response to subject access requests so that they don't go to the authorities, right? Make sure that you have that first line of defense. Another recommendation I would have, if you do have some presence in Europe or you're contacting people in Europe and you haven't done anything, I would consider not sending marketing emails over the course of the next 2 weeks. You need to regroup on that front and figure out what your lawful bases for contacting these people are. And then finally, start writing everything down. That's it.